Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Moon Knight, episode 2 of season 1. So, it seems that if we were to get a flash of Mark's suit in the first episode uh, of this Moon Knight suit, it seems that in episode 2 we are going to actually get a bigger variety of Moon Knight suits in the second episode, but also we are to see more action in this episode because there seems to be nothing else really legitimately going on as far as story wise. Because like we just have it where it feels like after the first episode where it's like, man, this episode was really like interesting to me. But then we just now turn around and we just have now like the second episode is just to be like, well, here's a showcase here, like we'll give you guys what you want. Here you go. But I'm just like, but wait a minute, like, you only have a certain number of episodes to progress story, and for how I was kind of gushing and thinking, like, maybe there's, like, a way that they can go on and, like, continue to just, like, wouldn't this be a great vehicle to start showcasing certain characters? I just don't think that that's going to happen. I think that we're just going to be stuck with this story kind of sloggingly like carrying it out. And so we technically get 2 episodes that are Steven focused, but I think within the following episode, with the way that this kind of finishes up, it seems like we're going to kind of carry on with the Mark side of things, because of course we also had a character that is to be more like put into the second episode that we didn't actually see in the first, which of course is Layla, because Layla, of course, in the first episode was only like a phone call away, but like she like wasn't actually in the episode, where in this episode she actually is to be shown here as like kind of almost being like the Moon Knight kind of sidekick, weirdly. So maybe she'll be like some kind of character that is to go on and consistently help out Moon Knight one way or the other. So we have this episode kind of going on and having it be like the aftermath of what was to happen from the first episode. But since Steven wasn't actually awake during that time period, we're just kind of having Steven kind of waking up the next day, and then he's going to go back to work and find out what had happened. And I'm like, man, like we just like we really just can't like show anything. And where I'm just kind of like feeling defeated at some points, because I'm like, man, you know what, if you could like have reorganized this episode to do a certain thing, like man, we could have had that cliffhanger that didn't feel like a cliffhanger whatsoever, and then we could have reorganized this episode. We could have really focused on us like having like a really good story for this second episode, because this just feels like, oh, we just needed a showcase a certain image, we just needed to show people a certain thing. And for how I was mentioning about Jake Lockley within the last episode, we may not even get to that character now. I guess we may not get to this character. We might just go with Stephen Grant, and we might just go with Mark, and that's it. Because I guess we already have Khonshu kind of rolling around in both Mark and Steven's brain, and I guess that's like complicated enough. Whatever. It's just like, it feels like there's so many like retcons and changes and things that I'm just like, man, like you're really going on and like shifting all of this stuff to where like I'm kind of satisfied, but then again I'm like, man, I wanted like so much more from the show, and it just feels like this is a show that was like so much nerfed than I thought it was gonna be. I was like, man, like they should really go on to like blow me away with this character. And for this second episode, I'm just still like, man, I can't wait till next week. Like, hopefully we just get something in next week where I'm just more like, I feel more fulfilled with this character. Like, it kind of really feels like I would much rather go on and just wait for the whole show to just be done and then, like, kind of go through it as a whole rather than go through every weekly episode, just because it's like, it'll be probably much more satisfying to watch it as a season rather than just watching it as one episode. Just because really there's a lot of stuff where it's like, yeah, I don't really want to, like, I don't really want to go through every, like, of the silly details that, like, I want to get to, like, the big events. Let's go on into the more important things, which this episode really doesn't do that at all. So, but here's one thing. It also feels like we go on, and Moon Knight technically does feel like Ghost Rider a little bit, because we find out within this episode that it seems that Khonshu has chosen other people to be their vessels at some point. So, really saying here that, like, Ghost Rider has had many different variations, like Johnny Blaze, Danny Ketch, Robbie Reyes, and anybody else that I kind of forgot about there, Carter Slade, the Undertaker guy, in the first film, who of course is the Sam Elliott. So we go on in to have it seem that there has technically been a Moon Knight version before, and it seems that that character was to be called the Fist of Vengeance, and we'll find out who that is by this episode. So yeah, so let's go on into spoilers. I'll go in and talk about the whole episode. Really, I think the only thing that I didn't say correctly within the last episode is about the Scarab, if I didn't say that before. It seems that we find out that the Scarab is not to power up Moon Knight. Really, we just find out that the Scarab is to really just be a compass for them to find Amet. I'm like, that seems like the stupidest thing. So, like, we basically just had a whole episode of these guys going on and chasing Moon Knight around for a compass. Like, can't these guys realize that they should easily be able to go on and find where this thing is by now? Like, I don't know. Like, this just seems too goofy that they need to go all the way to just find some compass to now play this, like, chase game. And what also makes this stupid is, like, whoever really is to get the compass, all you need to do is just follow that trail. Follow the person who is to be going on to try to find where Mid is, and well, bam, like, problem solved. Like, because what is Moon Knight really going to do here? Is he just going to go on and just keep it away from these guys for however long? Which I immediately feel like by the end of this episode, we're like mood point, but still, just man, this episode like had like some slivers of good things in it, but overall it was just like it felt pointless. So, but let's go on into the second episode. Let's double five this one up because it's about that time yet again. And this is like a 6-episode thing, so I'm like, I need to be like amazed every single episode. There can't be a waste anywhere, and I feel like this second episode was a waste. So let's go on. So I guess in the first episode, Moon Knight in the museum was going on and fighting a thing that Steven is to call a jackal. So, like, I was like, oh, okay, so, like, it's like an Anubis kind of thing, and it is to be a jackal, I guess. Like, that's kind of like, they don't have, like, a servant of Seth, or they don't have, like a certain kind of word, so they're going to go with jackal here. And I'm immediately thinking of, like, when I hear the word jackal, I'm thinking of like the Clone Saga Spider-Man series where we had the jackal that was to go up against Spider-Man in that series, and what an awful series that was. But it's not the same Jackal. It's not. It's like a green, weird goblin-looking character. So it's not the same thing. But anyways, so I guess we just kind of have it to where we have to assume that Mark was to take down that Jackal in that bathroom, because all that we really see is Steven waking up in his room, and he goes flying out of his bed and he falls over because he's still chained up, and like as if he's had some horrible nightmare. So Steven, of course, is by the next day going on and is making his way to work at this art gallery, and they keep calling it a museum, but I want to call it by the title of the building. I just do. So immediately we have it to where all of a sudden all the cast members that were in the first episode are all magically gone, as if this is like Deadpool again, where it's like, oh, well, like surprisingly, all the people that were in the first episode just magically vanished somehow, and all the people that we really have is just that one security guard that keeps calling Steven Scotty, and we just have Steven call the security guard Brav consistently. So we have Steven that is to make his way to have the security guard talk to Steven about like what happened last night, and Steven is of course talking to Brav or the security guard and saying like, well, like, hey, did you check the security footage from last night? And Brav is just like, no, like, I didn't check any of it. And he's like, well, hey, you need to check it because this is going to blow your mind. So all of a sudden we have it where Steven is going on here and showcasing this security guard this footage, and the entity that he was being chased by the episode before is surprisingly not there, as if they CGI'd him out, because CGI. And so here's a thing where I'm going to say about this character. Within the comic books, they always represent Moon Knight as we don't know whether or not that this guy is rationally sane or crazy. And so, like, we have this kind of back and forth thing of if really Moon Knight is just this loon and, like, he should be put in some, like, criminally insane hospital somewhere because, like, he's not really right in the head. And this episode is to technically showcase that maybe none of the stuff that's going on is really existing, but only existing within Moon Knight's head, bizarrely, because again, he may be crazy. So, like, that's the cool thing, that immediately when I saw that Moon Knight is being, or when Steven is being chased by nothing, I'm like, aha! Like, so we're still working on the fact that Steven can possibly just be crazy, and he could be imagining this the whole entire time, and we're still working on that. And I loved the fact that this entity is only visible via Steven, and I'm like, yes. So, like, that I thought was cool. So we have it where now Steven is to talk to the kind of like the head security of this place. And so the head security is to bring Steven in and is to go on and say, it's like, well, here's the thing. It seems like you have gone on and done some damage to this museum. And so it seems like we're going to have to go on and let you go. Because, like, you had gone on and done some severe damage here, and so we're going to fire you. And Steven explains later that he's going to have to, within installments, try to pay these guys back after he loses his job. Okay, that doesn't quite make any sense. But I guess, hey, it's better than prison. And plus, I'm sure Mark may easily fit the bill if we still have Mark, who is to still be this billionaire rich guy, I'm sure Mark won't have any problems just going on and paying whatever that thing was. So, or wouldn't it be interesting if Mark was actually to have owned the building that Steven was working in, and so Mark would just be like, "Here's the money," because like, how would anybody really know that Mark really owned that building and Steven was working under him? But here's the goofy thing. So I kind of also assumed that like Steven's personalities wouldn't all look identical to one another, because like if you kind of go through the comic book, we have like subtle different variations of the Moon Knight personas. And so I kind of assumed that people wouldn't have been able to easily like pick out between both Steven and both Mark. But I guess Layla is just like, "Oh, like why do you have this accent? Like that's the only real thing different than between Steven and between both Mark." And I'm like, "Man, that's disappointing." Like we could have really had Oscar here, who has like this wild, like different variety of characters to have really given us, but instead it's just like the only thing that's a real difference between Stephen and between Mark is an accent, and like there's certain other things that this guy knows that Mark doesn't, and I'm like, that sucks. It just does. So Mark gets fired, and so Mark is or Steven gets fired here, and we also had the moment where Steven was to go on and see Mark looking at Steven through this camera lens, like directly at him, just staring at him. And when Steven was to wake up in the morning, he was going into the mirror and he was trying to call Mark out, saying like, "Hey, do you have anything to say?" And we don't get anything. So now Steven decides that he's going to go on, and considering he has nothing better to do, Steven decides that he is going to figure out what that whole key thing was and try to track this thing down. And so Steven realizes that this is some key to some storage facility. And like not the containment unit storage facility, but like it's some like storage unit where like there's a number of like garages and kind of containers and whatever that you can kind of open up and go in and see all this stuff. So Steven is to go on and ask this guy, like, "Hey, like, I don't know what name that this thing is under. Like, I don't know if it's under Steven or under Mark. I don't remember the last name. But, like, hey, can you help me? Do you remember me?" So this guy's like, "Yeah, I never forget a face." And he put him in number 43. So the guy, of course, the security guy, is to go on and leave. And so Steven goes into this container to find out that we really have Mark, who is having this place of his own. Like he has this cot, he has like a number of just kind of items that it makes this almost seem like home. And I'm like, wait a minute. Mark is probably a billionaire or millionaire, but he's like living in shambles? This seems weird. So I'm like, what? Are they like retconning this character to now he's just like he's just some guy living in a shack somewhere? Like, I thought we would have saw like Mark like really living it up, but instead we're just seeing the opposite. So like I thought that that key might have led to some like lavish hotel room or something like that, but instead like we're just seeing this like squalor. And so because I think technically Mark can live within like Steven's place at some points when he's technically awake, but whatever. So Steven is to start rummaging through this bag that Mark was to have, and it is to have this ID, and it's to have all this money in it, and it's to have, of course, the golden scarab. And so we go on and have Steven playing with the scarab to go on and have this be some kind of compass. And Steven immediately is to figure out, it's like, aha, so this is to, like, it's to show us where to go somewhere. Oh, okay. So all of a sudden, Mark is to appear to Steven, and Mark again is to just consistently try and tell Steven, it's like, well, hey, like, how about you go into that cot, fall asleep, and I'll just kind of take over, because honestly, I should take over anyways. And Steven is like, no, like, I'm never going to give back into you. Like, this is not going to happen. So, because Steven is kind of taking control, because since he has like his day in the sun, like he's just gonna like, no, like I'm not gonna give it right back up to you so I can just wake up somewhere rando, and no, like I'm in control. So Steven takes this bag and is to make his way back to his place, where he of course is to be met by Layla, where Layla's going on and is like, wait a minute, like why do you have this accent? Why are you this like different person? This makes no sense. Uh, because Steven, when Steven was to leave his storage room, he all of a sudden is to have Conchu consistently show himself within the storage thing to scare Steven away, for him to eventually bump back into Layla. And so now they're talking, and so now we end up finding out that it seems that Steven is to know certain poems that it seemed that Layla was to also know. And so Layla is telling Steven that, hey, like, you never signed these papers. Like, I signed them, but now you have to. And Steven is like, well, these are divorce papers. Like, I would never divorce you. Like, because Steven is that desperate guy that is just like, oh, please, like I need a woman, where I guess Mark is just like in the mind of just like, dude, I can get any woman I want. And so, like, really, I'm not going to go on and like concentrate right now on being with Layla, because like there's an like Mark has to concentrate on being the vessel for Khonshu right now. So we have Steven that is very tempted to show Layla his sack of stuff, and Mark is telling him not to. Like, hey, do not show her any of that. Like, don't show her any of that. Don't show her the scarab. So Steven, of course, to go on and is to like just say, well, none of this is nothing. Nothing's in here. And so Layla decides to go into this sack herself and is to grab the scarab, and because she's starting to like thumb through all of uh, Steven's stuff, which is technically Mark's. So we still have Layla, who is still like kind of like, why are you still having that accent? None of this makes sense. And so all of a sudden these two police officers arrive, and so Layla decides that she's going to like Peter Parker this and hide away from off the rooftop of this building. And so both these police officers are coming in, and they're starting to thumb through Steven's stuff, and they're finding this ID that, of course, is say Mark Spector on it. And we go on, and like we have them realize that there's some kind of goofy stuff within this bag, and so they decide to go on quickly and arrest Steven here. And I think Steven was possibly thinking that, like, well, hey, like, guys, don't arrest me. Like, if anything, like, I talked it over with the guys about the whole bathroom thing, and within installments, like, I'm gonna be able to, like, to to fix that. I'll like, it's okay. Like, I've already squared it away with all these guys, and they're like, no, 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 we're gonna arrest you. So Steven gets arrested, and so now within this car ride, we of course have Mark that is desperately saying like, "Hey, let's switch over. Like, let me take control. Let me help you." And Steven's like, "No, I'm not going to do it. Like, you're never going to take control of me." And so, come to find out, we have both of these police officers who are both working with the Met. They're both working with Hero, and so we have it where Hero is to overhear this and like, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear about that. So we go on and we have Hero who takes Steven here, and like Hero is like, oh, so are you having like you having Conchu consistently talk with you? Like, is he telling you things? Is he telling you uh, that he is justice? Is he telling like every single thing that Hero is repeating is everything that Conchu is to say, because at some point Hero was a fist of vengeance and was a vessel of Conchu before, and so of course Hero here is to go on and tell Steven, it's like, well, yeah, like, I know all the stuff that he's going to say simply because like I've at some point been with him and been his vessel, and so like I know all the tricks that he's going to talk to you and tell you and whatever. As when Steven is to ask Hero, it's like, well, can you hear him also? And Hero's like, no, like I can't hear him now because I'm not his vessel. And but it's just the same old like the same old lines, the same old speech and whatever. So we have Khonshu that goes on, and he is to like create these winds and knock things over, and Hero is like, yeah, that's all that he can do. He's a spirit, and so basically he's like trying to like Patrick Swayze. If you guys were to ever see the movie Ghost, where Patrick Swayze would go on and try to move like this quarter or move this like this pin or whatever, same thing. Where we have Khonshu who's trying to like try to like attack things, but he really can't because he's a spirit now. He's the god of the moon. So we have Steven who's talking to Hero, and so really Hero is just like, well, like he doesn't really want to hurt Steven here. Like, really, like we have Hero that's saying that since Steven is to have so many personalities inside of him, that's the reason why that his like his balancing thing with his arm tattoo is to not work, because like you can't judge one person when there's several other things within inside of him. So like there's no way to go on, and I was like, oh, okay, so they made a lot more sense of why Hero said that Moon Knight was chaos in the first episode, was because there's so many like moving parts within inside Steven here that it's kind of hard for him to seek judgment. So Hero goes on and he's talking with Steven, and like really it just keeps coming down to, it's like, well, hey, like we need the Scarab to go on and find a Met. And Steven really does not want to go on and give him the Scarab, of course. And so really now it comes down to, it's like, well, like if you probably do not have it because we've kind of searched your place and we know that you just don't have it, then who does? And so all of a sudden we have it where, of course, Layla is to come in here with the Scarab, and now it's like an all-out brawl. And so what happens is Steven is trying to scramble away with Layla, And so now Steven is to seemingly fall, and we're assuming that he's going to fall to his death. And so now Mark is desperately pleading to Steven, like, hey, like, suit up, you need to put the suit on. And because Steven here is being chased by this jackal. And so now, like, Steven is like, well, suit up. And that's when we kind of get this more different, slight variation of Moon Knight. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So we're seeing like a wider variety of Moon Knight characters, which that's what I was kind of hoping for. I was hoping that we weren't going to get like just the same old kind of Moon Knight. And I think that that's going to be really cool if they ever take this character and like kind of like take him into other directions and like have us just go, ooh, this is really cool. Ooh, this is like a real cool. And when you go on and you have him go from this show to possibly a movie, like you can change and tweak the costumes, and probably no one would go on and know the wiser just because when really thinking about it, we can possibly have any kind of combinations because, of course, Moon Knight can go on and just kind of think of whatever his suit is. There isn't like a specific layout or whatever, and so that's kind of interesting to just kind of think about. So Steven is all of a sudden to think that he is to have like really injured himself, but he's in the Moon Knight suit, and so he just gets right back up, and he's like, oh, okay, so like that should have hurt a lot more than it actually did, but like so Steven is to all of a sudden look at himself in the mirror and realize that he now is to be this different kind of Moon Knight. And so Mark is kind of also in the Moon Knight suit also. And so we have Mark kind of ridiculing Steven for his choice in suit. And Steven is just like, well, yeah, like this is just what I like could think of. And because you guys just said suits, so I just like it just came out to be this. Which I honestly think this is kind of a much cooler version of Moon Knight, but uh really like I don't know if it's gonna be really like the perfect way of which to like go into combat with a suit on. It seems kind of weird, but it will be interesting to see how this kind of plays out in future episodes. So we have Steven who decides like he has the Moon Knight power and he's gonna go on and try to fight off this jackal. And so we really have it where like Steven is trying to face off against this thing. He just tosses off his blazer and he starts fighting this thing. And like there is really a back and forth like thing. And when Layla is to go on and try to like see what Steven is fighting here, she can't see it. And so now all of a sudden we have Layla that's trying to figure out some way of trying to be able to see this jackal by like pouring stuff on it or trying to like go on and like figure out a way to kind of have like a spraying kind of thing to just kind of like how in Hollow Man you would go on and spray this thing with like a fire extinguisher. Same kind of thing here where like Layla is trying to figure out how she can see this. So we have both Layla and we have both Moon Knight that are trying to fight this thing off. And it just feels like a lot of times like Steven is getting beaten up. He's just getting overpowered. And so Mark is just desperately pleading at this point to Steven. It's like you don't have the skills to fight this thing. So like you need to leave this to me. Like you need to have me fight this guy. Because if supposedly in backstories, like Mark is to actually have military like training, military experience, I believe. And so like Steven has nothing. So it's just like he might as well give it to the guy that actually knows what he's doing. He knows how to fight his way out of things. So and it was kind of cool to have Mark all this or Steven all of a sudden like whip out these like sticks that we technically see here. And I was like, man, like why didn't he do anything with those sticks? Because this feels like a very like Daredevil kind of character. But he didn't do anything with the sticks. I was like, man, what a disappointing thing. Like he just plops them out, just like, oh, this is cool. But then he does nothing with them. And then we go on and we have Mark who switches over, and it completely changes the Moon Knight costume to where now we see the costume from the first episode. And of course, that's when the CGI starts to kick in, where it's like CGI versus CGI, and I'm like, like you can obviously tell it's CGI, um, but I'm just like, okay, like all right. So we go on and have Mark take this jackal and stab this jackal into this thing and kill it off. This little set piece that kind of like rams through it. So like rams through, I think, like the stomach of it. So that is of course to be killed off, and I'm like, man, this there's nothing going on in this episode. So all of a sudden we have Khonshu that is talking with Mark after Mark is talking to Steven, because Steven is now in this like reflection, and Steven is like, oh, so this must be what it feels like to like be like on your side of things, like to be technically awake while you're still like being this character. And honestly, so much about this does kind of feel like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, with the Jacqueline Hyde thing, where, and I'm sure that's where they probably stole it from, because we have it where when like Dr. Jekyll is being Dr. Jekyll, we all of a sudden have Hyde who's in the mirror, and so like I think that's probably where they stole it from, because I think a lot of this is them just trying to like find like a different approach to like multiple personality things. And so they probably went on and like, hey, well, I've seen League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, so let's kind of sift from that. So Mark is talking with Steven, and Steven is wanting to desperately take control, and Mark is like, it's not going to work. I'm sorry. Like, now that I've gone on and taken control, like, I'm not going to give it up. I'm sorry. Like, you're just going to be stuck there in the mirror world until, like, I'm satisfied with all that I need to accomplish here. And Steven is just kind of getting really upset, and Mark is just wanting Steven to just shut up. And so Mark is just breaking this mirror, telling Steven to just shut up because he just no longer wants to talk to him, because Steven is just a weaker persona. So all of a sudden, Khonshu is to come on, and Khonshu is to immediately tell Mark, it's like, well, hey, like, you're messing with the terms of our agreement, and you think that you actually have control? No. Like, I have control. I tell you what to do. Like, Khonshu is to basically say, it's like, well, hey, like, if I tell you to jump, you'll say how high, because like if it wasn't for Khonshu, Mark would have been dead. Because, like, in the comic books, we of course had it where, like, Mark, of course, was in the military, and he was to be bleeding out and was possibly going to die. And they had oddly found Khonshu and made a deal with him for, uh, like, to have Mark go on and take this cape and take on the mantle of Moon Knight to save his own life. So I would probably make a million different comparisons to Ghost Rider here, even though the Ghost Rider movies, like, the Ghost Rider movies honestly aren't that good. I'll admit that. There's some good things about them, but like the overall movie is just like it just kind of like leaves me with like a bad taste in my mouth. Just be like, man, like these movies could have gone like a million times better, if they really cared about like supernatural and horror like characters. Like, I think Blade movies are good, but like Moon Knight movies are just Moon Knight episodes are just kind of like meh. Like it's these are what I would just call like there's some better things in this show than others, but still, like, Falcon and Winter Soldier just blows all. Um, so so at the end of this episode, we kind of have Mark, who's realizing how short of a leash that he has, and but now we're gonna go on and also realize that Haro is to go on and get the compass away from some hobo, and he is to go off and kill one of these people that it was to be holding onto the compass, because I guess one of these guys were to go on and take the compass away from Layla, and so like this hobo was to be able to just find this compass, and so Haro was to take it from him. So we realize now that it seems that Haro is going to have the compass and find Emmett, and maybe that's what they're kind of building towards, like the what is to be the Emmett version of Moon Knight is going to battle possibly Moon Knight here. Maybe that might be Bushman, or the Bush guy. Maybe that might lead on to possibly any number of scenarios here that could lead to an interesting villain for at some point Moon Knight to face. So that might be interesting. That might be good enough to keep me intrigued about the show. But I think other than that, I'm going to get out of here so I can go on and kind of keep this at a shorter, as short as I can review. So let me know in the comments below how you feel about Moon Knight episode 2. If you just are like, man, the show is just like sucking, I can understand that. If people are liking the show and I'm being too harsh on it, it is what it is. But like, I want to try to be always honest about these shows. I don't want to say like, man, the show is great, when I don't really feel that. It's just like I'm not trying to like act my way into saying like, oh, something is like isn't a turd or is a turd or what. Like, I'm just being honest. Like, I'm just having my own opinion about something, and people could have their wildly opposite opinions, because people can like movies that I didn't, or hate movies that I loved. And that can be okay at the end of the day, because I'm just going to move on with my life and just continue to do other videos. So, bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.